questions that have come out of the 2026 season, and that is, what has gone wrong at Aston Martin, right? Now, Aston Martin is a serious team, right? Like, look, like 2023 and 2024, they finished 5th in the Constructors. To put that into perspective, P1 to 4 consisted of McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, right? So they were the 5th. They were the next best, right? And those are the big boys on the grid, arguably, right? So they finished 5th. That's serious, right? That's very good. But to now, like this season where they have a car which is virtually undrivable. I mean, guys, like, I don't know if you've seen the video, but I saw an onboard of Alonso at the British Grand Prix, and that onboard was genuinely the most insane thing I've seen. It was a 12-second clip, right? But Alonso was fighting the car around 2 corners, which honestly you should not be fighting your car around, especially this far into the season, right? And on top of that, in the clip, towards the end of it, you see Lance Stroll in front of him, right? And he nearly spins out. He nearly spins out on a straight. How is his team designed, like, you know, cars that were finishing 5th in the Constructors to now battling with the likes of Cadillac? And you know what? Even then, Cadillac probably have a more stable car than Aston Martin. That is shocking, right? Cadillac, this is their first season in F1, and they're putting Aston Martin to shame. That is crazy to think, right? So, like, look, I've done the research here, so just sit back and listen and let me know if you agree or not, right? But look, I think I figured out 4 key points as to why Aston Martin may not be firing on all cylinders, and you know, probably explains their absolutely horrific car this season, right? So hear me out, right? But this is my opinion, and if you disagree, by all means let me know in the comments. But the first thing I've got to say, right, Adrian Newey as team principal probably wasn't the wisest decision from Aston Martin, right? Now, hear me out on this, right? Because I love Adrian Newey. I think his design philosophy, the way that he can see air, like the cars that he's designed in the past, like they have been incredible, right? The man knows how to create a fast car, right? Like he is a genius when it comes to that, right? This is what he's known for. But in his role at Red Bull Racing and prior to that, like, he's been in technical roles, right? So at Red Bull Racing, he was the chief technical officer. Now, what does that role actually mean? Well, that role just means that he's being employed to build the fastest car possible within the regulations, right? And he can do that. Like, we know he can do that, right? So I'm not knocking him that he can do that. But team principal is another ball game, right? Because team principal is higher than that, right? Team principal is in charge of managing the technical teams, the strategy teams, you know, the marketing teams, the sponsor teams, the on-track team. Like, you're managing all these people from a higher level, right? But what that means is, like, you know, you have to have a different set of skills. And I'm not saying Adrian Newey doesn't have those skills, but, you know, he's gone from a technical role where he's been focusing on designing fast cars, right, to, you know, having to deal with the politics side of things. Because let's not forget, like, the F1 team principals have to deal with the whole politics side. You have to deal with the FIA. You have to deal with, you know, Formula One. You have to deal with other team principals. You have to deal with, you know, you have to lodge complaints. You have to, you know, scrutinize your own cars. You have to do all these things, right? All these things that a chief technical officer wouldn't necessarily do, right? So I feel like Adrian Newey, amazing CTO, but team principal may not be the right person for the role, right? Think about it this way, guys. Let's think of the more iconic team principals that we've had in recent years, right? Toto Wolff, man, the guy is charisma. He's a character, right? But he's a firm man when he needs to be. He's a sort of character that you need to have as a team principal, right? And then previously Red Bull had Christian Horner. This man was ruthless, right? An absolute character. Like, he was controversial. He was, you know, like he there's a certain type of character you have to be in team principal, right? If you want to be a team principal, you got to be charismatic. You got to be, you know, you got to be put your foot down. You got to be very adamant. You got to be vocal, outspoken. I don't think that, you know, Adrian Newey as team principal has really helped in that regard with Aston Martin. But, you know, maybe I'm waffling. I don't know. But I don't see that same side of it. I think every other team principal on the grid is fighting for something. Like, they're very, you know, vocal, outspoken, and they make themselves known and very visible, especially across media. And yeah, it's just that you know, that's my thoughts, right? I think Adrian Newey if someone can come in as a team principal at Aston Martin, and Adrian Newey specialises into the technical side of it again, I think they can go and they can really go and actually challenge for something. That's the reality of it. But look, that's point one, right? Point two is something that you're all probably predicting. The relationship between Lawrence and Lance Stroll, right? Father-son relationship. But this is probably the serious problem in this team. Because look, Lawrence Stroll, we all know he owns a team. He's got his son in that seat. His son's been in that seat for what, like 9 years now, 8 years, something silly like that. And he's like I'm not knocking Lance Stroll here, but like, you know, in an F1 setting, especially nowadays, right? Teams are putting together driver pairings which are solid, right? They're putting in performances, right? Like look, like there's teams like obviously your top runners like Mercedes, McLaren. They got very good driver pairings. You got the likes of VCarb, right? Who are a midfield team. They're doing very well this season as well. Look, Arvid Lindblad, Liam Lawson. They're putting in serious shifts. But then, you know, I feel like Aston Martin need to realise that, you know, they need to have two drivers that are performing well. Or if one that's doing very well, one that's still doing pretty decent, right? Because right now, they're relying so heavily on Alonso. Like, I don't think you realise how heavily they're relying on this man, right? This man somehow managed to get a point in this current Aston Martin car. I don't know how he managed to do that, but that is like unheard of, right? So, and Lance Stroll hasn't really done much this whole season. So I feel like, you know, if you have a driver pairing like that where one's carrying another, it doesn't really help your case. You're not really gonna be able to battle. Like honestly, I think Cadillac, right, are gonna do way better just because they've got Perez and Bottas, two second drivers that, you know, are very well experienced, right? I genuinely think that they'll do better than Aston Martin. That's mad to think, right? A new team on the grid doing better than an existing team that's been there for years. Like that's insane to think. So look, I think they need to really reevaluate that whole driver pairing. And I'm not saying get rid of Alonso necessarily, but you know, they really need to think about Lance Stroll here. And the sad thing is that I don't think Lance Stroll's going to leave, right? I don't think his heart's even in the F1 like that right now. I think he's just doing it to keep his dad happy, right? But honestly, like Lance Stroll is probably one element that needs to be considered long term if they want to really challenge for a world constructors championship at least. And look, third point, which is building on point two, is around growing too quickly. So Lawrence Stroll, right? He's pumped in so much money into his team, right? I think in 2019, 2020, he pumped in $150 million into his team, or give or take around that much. That's serious money, guys. Serious, right? If you're pumping in that much money, you're here to stay in F1 for a long, long time, right? And look, with that money, they've done a lot. They got a whole new factory, right? They got a whole new wind tunnel, right? Purpose-built, like matching the 21st century needs of an F1 team, right? And they've done very well, right? In terms of like getting the financial investment, like converting it into, you know, capital and, you know, doing what they need to in terms of like getting the facilities and everything ready for them to do well. But growing too quickly, they've grown too quickly, basically is what I'm trying to say, right? Because it's all well and good having all of those bits, but what about your teams, right? Your team need to expand, need to adapt. You need to be able to, you know, have some cohesion, some flow. And I don't think that the team's flowing necessarily. I think they're sort of just, you know, like so much has gone on so quickly that they haven't been able to expand sustainably. And that's sort of causing some issues there, which is quite frustrating. But I mean, look, in 5 years' time, like they're probably doing really well. I don't know, right? They could do really well. But right now, like I think there's probably some truth to this growing too quickly and the impacts that it's had on chemistry. Go remember, guys, think about that game of FIFA. I know it sounds crazy, but you know, you can have the best players in the team, right? But if their chemistry is zero, like you're not really gonna do well. Like the through balls ain't gonna connect. Do you know what I mean? So look, I think that's point three that I made, which I think is another reason as to why Aston Martin aren't really doing that well. And point four, which is a big one, right? A big one in my eyes, is around this Mercedes and Honda power unit situation, right? So look, it's no secret that Aston Martin were a customer team of Mercedes for years, right? For years. Pink Mercedes gate, you know, all of that. They've been using the Mercedes power unit up until the end of last year. And look, like the Mercedes power unit has been very reliable, right? It's been a very good power unit. Mercedes know exactly what they were doing with their turbo, with their V6 hybrids. But here's the key thing, right? the risk that they made in terms of going to Honda for this season, I don't think they really assessed the risks of using Honda. I mean, they probably looked at Red Bull and thought, yeah, okay, Red Bull used them. They won a few championships with them. Like, it's been really good. But I don't think they really, thought about the risks, because, like, going from Mercedes to Honda was genuinely a huge risk. It was huge, right? And I think they underplayed it. And we can see right now that the Honda power unit isn't doing that well. It's not doing that well for them. I mean, the start of the season was abysmal. That car was so unreliable. It was literally shaking. Remember, Alonso was complaining about his whole body was shaking. Like, he couldn't even hold the steering wheel. Like, it was dangerous. It was a dangerous car to drive. And I think that side of things, especially, like, this is something that I don't know if I touched on, but you've gone from old regulations to one where there's more emphasis on electrical power, right? I don't think they thought this through in terms of choosing Honda for that, because I mean, as much as Red Bull used them in 2021 and so forth, I don't think they really truly underestimated the impact of the new power units on not just power, but the power unit and whatnot, but also the entire car. And that hasn't helped them at all, right? That hasn't helped them at all. And it was a risk. I mean, it hasn't paid off so far, but with more refinements and involvement with Honda, like, they're gonna do very well. But I reckon in the long term. But right now, like, look, we know the front runner, right? Mercedes. If they had that Mercedes power unit in there, you know what, they might be doing very well. Like, the Mercedes power unit is by far the best power unit on the grid so far, right? Like, the teams that are using the Mercedes power unit are doing pretty well, right? I mean, Mercedes themselves are doing amazing with that power unit. So, look, like, it's clearly the best power unit. The Honda is not the greatest, so this year it's a gamble, but hopefully they can refine it and make it better. But it's not really looking good for this season so far, let's just say that. So, look, guys, that was my 4 key points that I wanted to touch on around potential reasons as to why Aston Martin was so bad nowadays. But look, I want to hear from you guys. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with those 4 points? Do you have any more points that I've maybe missed out? You should let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed and following all my handles. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Catch you in a bit.